Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Drums and Drams. My name's Cameron, and today I'm going to be taking a look at Larceny Barrel Proof Batch B524. And yes, as you can see, I've got 3 other batches poured out, ready to go here on the table for some comparisons at the end of this video. I'll do my best to get through those as quickly as possible so that we're not getting into the weeds and drinking Larceny Barrel Proof together for an hour, because frankly, I cannot think of a worse fate to subject somebody to, and I know that's a little dramatic, but it's also my way of segueing to what I tell you in every single video I do when I review Larceny Barrel Proof, which is that this is just really not my flavor profile. I'm not a big Larceny Barrel Proof fan. There are 1, maybe 2 batches that I've kind of fallen in love with, not just as a good Larceny Barrel Proof batch, but as a good bourbon in general. Those are batches C922 and in some ways C923. Those are pretty different profiles between the two, but we can talk more about like Larceny Barrel Proof profiles and things as we get into this video. But it is kind of worth pointing out here that I'm a little biased. Maybe, or maybe it's just that, you know, I just am not, I'm not into this whiskey so much. So we'll find out if B524 is going to kind of change my mind. And let me know in the comment section if you've had the chance to try this one as well. Hit that like button if you wouldn't mind. Last thing before we get to the nose of B524 is I want to quickly thank TimTamSlam here on YouTube and in Patreon/Discord. When I was up at Evernorth Spirits last week with the Bourbon Junkies picking some rye barrels, on my way back from Michigan, I stopped off in Ann Arbor, met up with Tim, and he hooked me up with this bottle of B524, which is how I'm able to do this review. So thank you, Tim, for doing this and for your generosity. And I think that's it. Other than the stats, this one's coming in at 125.4 proof, which is 62.7% ABV. All of these on the table are within a proof or point or 2 of this, so we're not going to go through all the individual proofs when we do those side by sides. 6 to 8 years old is what Heaven Hill says about this product. It's a wheated bourbon, and that is going to do it. So on to the nose now. Let's see what we get. Cheers. Wow, so I got to tell you what, this is a very intense, like I would say a hot batch of Larceny Barrel Proof, and it actually reminds me in some ways, not necessarily like the notes I'm getting, but in the feel of this on the nose, it reminds me of Elijah Craig Barrel Proof B524, which I reviewed recently, not only on this channel, but on the Bourbon Junkies channel as well. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. It's got that hot profile, that super spice forward profile that Elijah Craig B524 had as well. But as much as I want to write this off, like when I first nose it, I just, you know, one little sniff here, I'm like, I'm done. I don't know. It's hot. It's just like every other Larceny Barrel Proof. I actually think it's worth giving this one a second chance. And I'll tell you why here in a second. Yeah, you know, for me, Larceny Barrel Proof is all about personality. It's a profile across the board when you have bad batches, in my mind, or very average batches. Like that profile is baking spice forward. It's hot. It's young. There's not a ton of fruit going on in there. Sometimes it's a little like abrasive, bright, sour, like apple skins or like pear skins. So it's a little bitter. Like, but it's not some deep, rich thing. The batches that I've enjoyed, C922, C923, have an aspect to them that is not just making those base notes of the whiskey, like the base profile of Larceny Barrel Proof. It's not maxing that out necessarily. It's adding something that's, in my mind, helping the whiskey have, again, some sort of personality. So like C922 was maple syrup and like waffles, very breakfasty. And C923 was this note that I've not gotten on any other batch, which is bright, like buttery, like honey butter, bright butterscotch, but just super sweet and buttery across the board. Those are 2 very different things. So it's not like I'm shooting for one profile of Larceny Barrel Proof that I think is good. I actually am shooting for the off-profile ones, and that's kind of where my mind goes. So that was a huge, long spiel. Sorry about that at the beginning of this video. But all that to say, this I don't think is just hot for hot's sake. I think there's actually something here. So back to the nose. We're going to try to keep it a little tighter here moving forward. Yeah, okay, so let's get into it. Well, maybe. Lots of baking spices here. I promise I haven't been drinking that much before this video. Lots of baking spices on this one, as is common for Larceny Barrel Proof. In this case, it's so cinnamon forward, almost a little bit, like I said, chili pepper on Elijah Craig B524, almost a little bit of that on here, but it's definitely more of a cinnamon forward batch. But there is this really rich cherry note behind it that I do not ever get on Larceny Barrel Proofs. Sometimes I get like baked peach notes. Sometimes, again, I'll get brighter like green apple, apple skin, pear skin, like kind of a bitter, bright fruit note. But I'd never get this solid, almost Luxardo cherry kind of profile. Cocktail cherry syrup, you know? I get that on the nose here. So even though it is hot and it's very intense, very spice driven, it has something behind that to back up that profile that's a little bit unique. I don't know. I don't know if I'm getting soft on Larceny Barrel Proof or what's going on right now. So, all right, let's just get this on the palate. We'll come back to the nose. Here we go. Cheers. It is hot. Wow, very hot. I mean, for me, first sip of this, and I've had some pours before this video, but not too many, I promise. This is like the edge of spicy for me. It's almost uncomfortably spicy on the first sip. Huge finish right now. Absolutely massive whiskey. And I'm going to keep doing this comparison. Elijah Craig B524. It's the same thing. It feels like the heat is and I mean not only alcohol proof, but I also mean spice. It's like the heat is just a little bit on top of the flavor the whole time. The flavors underneath can never quite break through all the way. Even so, I loved Elijah Craig B524 minus that flaw, and I'm actually kind of enjoying this Larceny B524 as well. I think the comparisons here are going to be very, very telling, but let's go back to the nose just very quickly one more time. We'll do one more sip, then we'll do these comparisons. Yeah, all right, so there is some peanut funk here. There is some wheat bread going on. You can smell it is a wheated bourbon. Not every Larceny Barrel Proof is necessarily very forward with that kind of a note. This one I do pick up, yeah, wheat bread, tons of baking spices, but this cherry note is the thing that kind of keeps on going, keeps on giving, and it's what I like about it. Yeah, all right, so I think solid all the way around. Let's do one more sip here. Yeah, I might be getting soft. Second sip does show more youth. Not a big fan of that. It gets nuttier on the second sip, so less impact from the cherry notes. Still very spicy. The star of the show for this is finish. Like, yeah, it pops you at the front. Proof hounds gonna love it. If you want a little more fruitiness in this one compared to other batches, those kind of people looking for that profile are gonna love it. And the finish, like if you're someone that likes a finish in a whiskey, this thing just goes on and on and on. So let's do some comparisons now. Over here on your left is going to be batch A124. This is the most recent release before this one. I was pretty lukewarm about A124. I thought it had nothing that really stood out. Rewatched my video. I talked about like baked peach notes on this. I think I may have said grilled peaches in that video. Talked about cocoa powder, milk chocolate. It had a little bit of that going on. But by and large, it was just kind of average for me. So let's do this comparison because I think what's important between the three batches we're going to compare it to is maybe not everybody watching this video has tried all of these batches, but maybe you've tried one of them. And so your point of reference to what I'm saying about B524, you're only going to get one point of reference here and not all three. So I think it's important to kind of go down the line and see how they all compare. That way, hopefully you can, find that point where you can kind of relate to this. So anyways, A124 on the nose very quickly. Much more muted on the nose. Yeah, and look, it's got more of this baked peach thing going on in there and a little bit more chocolate. Yeah, B524, super, super spicy. Honestly, I'm starting to like it a little bit less as I go through this review. As I go through this comparison, I do like kind of how round A124 is on the nose, but let's see on the palate how it does. It's kind of flat on the palate though. So it's like it's a trade-off here. And I mean, this is going to die away super fast on the finish. You can already tell once it hits the palate. And that is the case. So it's kind of between these two. It's like, what do you value? Do you want something very, very easygoing, like kind of background whiskey? I think someone said that recently. I don't know if it was the Junkies or Matt. I can't remember. Maybe I read it somewhere. It's kind of like a background whiskey for me. A124 doesn't have any kind of personality is what I'm trying to say. So B524 for me, even though that comparison makes B524 feel even hotter, even a little bit younger, I don't know, maybe that's okay. So now let's go over to this side of the table. And what we have here is C923 and B523. So I'm going to start here with B523, which I think is a very balanced batch. It had a nice dark fruit note. And so let's see how those aspects compare to this B524. Wow, so yeah, there is like a grape note to this one. And B523 I really liked because it drank easy, it had that balance, but the standout part of it was kind of that darker profile with a little bit of the fruity aspect. And I stand by that. So let's do a sip of this B523. B523 is just delicious whiskey. I did like that batch. It didn't perform well for me in a blind flight. It's very delicious, very balanced, but again, pretty short finish on this. And these are all, again, wheated bourbons. So I have to imagine that short finish, that's kind of a facet of talking about wheaters. If it's not a short finish, then I think that's kind of the outlier quality. So that one's fine. B523, the notes I like, the drinking experience I don't like as much because it falls off a bit. Now let's check out, again, B524 really quickly. Getting a little cornbread note on this now. All right. It's just, the palate experience is really, really nice on this. So there's something to like about each of these. And now finally on to C923, which I think many of you are, many of you that have tried this are probably fans of this batch because of that bright sweetness, totally off profile for this brand. So here we go on the nose. Oh, it's like, oh, it smells good. It smells like honey butter. For a long time, I didn't like this nose. I thought this was weird and kind of bright and a little bit artificial. Didn't make a lot of sense to me. The more I've spent time with C923, I think it's really, really nice stuff. But notice, like, again, every batch that I'm talking about, everything, I'm talking about a particular standout note in most cases. This is that butterscotch, honey butter. B523 is the dark fruits. A124, kind of nondescript, kind of why I'm not a big fan of it. All right, on the palate now, C923. Oh my God. Yeah, that's definitely the winner on the table, C923. Let's go back to B524 one last time, and then we're going to wrap this video up. C923, very, very short finish, and I do remember that being a critique of mine. So again, that's the rule. And the exception seems to be this B524's drinking experience, even if other things are sacrificed. Good God, it's intense. It is intense freaking whiskey. Wow. I mean, this drinks like 133 to 135 proof for me. By comparison, knowing that it's 125, add 10. You know, that's how it feels. So, is this a standout batch? Even though it has its own personality, its own identity in the line, I don't know that this is a standout batch. This is not something that I think folks are going to kind of fawn after like they did C923 and like I do for C922. I don't think so. I think it's just an above average batch, kind of like Elijah Craig B524. I find it interesting that both have similar profiles with their drinking experience and with what they're focusing on with those blends. Maybe that was intentional, maybe that was not intentional. But if you've tried one, you can kind of predict what the other one would taste like. or vice versa if you know the two profiles. So that's going to do it, guys. Hit that like button. Drop me a comment below if you've had the chance to try this B524. I know this video went on a little bit longer than I wanted, but hey, it wasn't an hour, which is about as good as I can do at this point. When you have this many comparisons on the table, you got to get through all of them, and I tried to do it very quickly. So let me know in the comment section again if you've tried this, if you've compared it to some of these other ones, and what you think about these various batches of Larceny Barrel Proof. And thanks for the support. We just hit 8,000 subscribers just before I started filming this video, which is incredible. We're doing so many great things, great barrel picks in the Patreon. So if you want to support the channel, $5, $10, $25, or $50 a month over in the Patreon, we have a great Discord community as well. So cheers, and I will see you next time here on Drums and Drams.